Okay, so moving to خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار. So the first now introduction to the differentiation between another duality, and that's the duality between human beings and the jinn. Human beings are created from, which is consistent with other biblical revelations, created from clay-like substance, from earth to earth, from dust to dust. Something that, whether whether do we know exactly what that clay looks like, what the mud looks like, what does it exactly mean? There's some hadiths that are not well authenticated that says that God molded Adam and left him in clay form for 6 weeks, and then put the soul in him and left it for 6 weeks. They're not authentic, so regardless of where they were reported. So if you encounter it, just discount it. It's not. We don't know. The truth of the matter is, we don't know what created human beings from clay, what type of clay. But we know that our substance is very different from another type of substance and another type of creation. The jinn. Now, jinn is created, and here marriage is fascinating, because marriage in Manar doesn't mean fire. Contrary to what a lot of marriage Manar, some have interpreted it as smokeless fire. Some said no, the marriage is the energy that comes from heat. So they're created from energy. In our modern terminology, you would say they're created from energy. Now here's the thing that I find, I get a kick out of it. I watch ghost shows, and I see when they have EMF detectors, and they sit there and they measure the increase in electromagnetic field, right? And through that, they have something like, and then when it goes, it buzzes. And when it buzzes, then they start using the recorder and say, is anyone here? And then they catch a voice on EVP, right? EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. Now, I get a kick because they are capturing what or I know about, the jinn. And the jinn is every much part of reality. Shadow creature or shadow man or whatever they're called, they're real. They exist. And the Quran tells us that some of them exist in seas, some of them exist in heavens, some of them are earthbound. But here's the refrain. As Surah Rahman tells us, some of them are pious, and some of them, like human beings, are impious. After, and this is a long subject, but I'll just whet your appetites for something that we might talk about much, much later, because it's in a very different surah. After the Prophet Sulaiman, Solomon, the permission to interact with human beings to jinn was withdrawn. So the jinn that interact with human beings are impious. And Allah tells us in the Quran, فَزَادُوهُمْ رَهَقًا, those human beings who interact with the jinn, it means that you are able to, if you want to. You can get the equipment, you can even download it as an app on your phone. Don't do it, because if you open that door, you don't know how to close it. And you can even open it as easily as one of these, what do you call it? Planchette? Ouija boards. Extremely dangerous. You'll open a door that you do not know how to close. What comes through, you cannot control. And so many people have been diabolically deceived by jinn to thinking that they can control what comes through. Eventually, for that jinn to take complete control of them. Possession is real, people. I was going to be a physics major. I've read, all the physics and all the biology, and I took my physics courses and biology courses at Yale. So I didn't, I was taught physics by, actually he was a war criminal because he's the guy that created Agent Orange that poisoned Vietnam, that they threw into Vietnam. So the guy who actually taught me, actually it was biochemistry, sorry. I didn't like him because I knew he was a war criminal, but he was very arrogant about but I'm digressing anyway. But my point is, and I read a lot about dark matter because that's another fascination, but it's real. Now, does this mean everyone that appears on TV and says I'm possessed is no, of course not. Possession, when it exists, it's undeniable. You're not going to have to think very hard about its existence. And it is not, it's quite different than, and the first thing, by the way, the shuyukh that do deal with possession, the first thing they do is bring in psychiatrists as a consultant. But I'll tell you, you can smell it. They do miraculous things that defy the laws of nature and the laws of physics and so on. So it's not some guy that says, "Oh, I don't feel good. I have a demon inside of me. I have a jinn inside of me." It's quite clear. But if you open these doors, it's extremely dangerous. Now, why did I digress in that? I don't know, because I just wanted to. The reality of the jinn, what is remarkable to me, is that at the time that the Quran talks about this is all before we discovered electromagnetic equipment and before we started. There's actually now a device that I've seen on TV that maps the form of an anomaly that appears. You can, if you watch Ghost Adventures particularly, they use that device. It's fascinating because the anomaly they capture they comment about the way that lines will work. Now, if you've read what the ancients said about both in the Kabbalah and in Ilm al-Rahman, what Muslims said about jinn, it wouldn't puzzle you very much because these forms have been described by people who have had experiences and who've always regretted it. Either regretted it or ended up being...
That were possessed, people...
Well, we have the testimony of a few sheikhs that went down that road and had horrific experiences, including sons. The most famous one, the one who had 2 sons that committed suicide and he realized it. But they left testimonials. But the others, they as our teachers would say, if those who would deal with jinn in order to exploit, they end up even smelling bad. You could smell them. They smell like sulfur. The presence of jinn in the human realm has a very specific smell and feel to it.
Like fire, like that.
You feel, actually, it's very interesting. They absorb energy so much that you feel very cold when they enter the room. They're like an energy.
What about the gem that they use for make a surgery, or you must have heard this. We have it in like villages in Egypt, but now it's like I hear about it in Brazil and
it's all the healing.
Perform the surgery, not just heal.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched several videos of it where the person just goes in and grabs some. Listen, I mean, it's not if I am ill, I would carefully vet out who I would go to. Now, I have had hijama done, and it was very helpful. But hijama, it's done by shuyukh where they do bloodletting. Yeah, cupping.
Bloodletting, yeah.
But this is different than hijama. I mean, I would vet out who I'm doing because you're playing with fire. The person doing it could be someone blessed by God to heal. Possible. Now, if they're not very careful, they themselves could, if they betray the trust given to them by God, they could very easily go the other way. So, the most famous story that we would, I've heard in so many and eventually found in a book, is and then later on I actually knew someone that had similar stories. There's a sheikh that used to do that in Tanta, and he looked lustfully at a woman that came to him, and that was his end. After that he couldn't concentrate on prayer, he couldn't, he became a mess.
He lost.
It's a special gift, but vet out who it is, because God has the power to give certain human beings the power to heal, and unfortunately so does Shaitan. And if you get the healing, make sure that it's, and if in doubt, then don't do it. If you're not sure, if
It's
that's
when you
someone
said
on
some
God's
of them
side
are
or
pious and some are not pious, that's when I had the question.
yeah, no, the healing is not from pious jinn,
Mhm.
and the healing is from God. The pious jinn
Right,
don't give
right,
the power,
right.
but just the danger is so many people, so many start out, and if you, by the way, if you could read in the history of occult practices from the Greeks up till today, and so many individuals that start out healing human beings, doing good, and then move to acts of incredible evil. The most famous is that monk in Russia, Rasputin, who started out a healer and then became, raped women and molested children, and he became an absolute monster. We read stories like Rasputin as morality examples of how you could start out a blessed human being
Good intention.
and gravitate towards a complete other side. Did you have your hands up at one point?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I guess I've never come across this talk about interaction with jinn. I mean, as a Muslim, I believe in jinn as being an entity created by God, but this thing about interaction and that they're pious and unpious and those that have healing powers, and I'm extremely skeptical, but that's my ignorance. That's my ignorance because I haven't come across this information.
When modernity came in, and especially scientific revolution, and a lot of reformers, I mean, people like Muhammad Abdul and Sheikh Shaltut and Abdul Halim Mahmoud and so on, wanted to put an end to superstitious beliefs because they wanted Muslims to pursue science in order to catch up with the developed world. So they introduced in the, and I'm not saying wrongly so, because I completely understand what they were trying to achieve. They introduced in the curriculums of schools in all over the Muslim world eventually, but it started out in Egypt and spread from Egypt elsewhere, and India, the two main locus points. An emphasis on material knowledge and scientific knowledge, and de-emphasis on anything beyond that. So, for instance, Jilani, well, you could Google when he died, but he's just among the usual texts. So I'll just read to you what he says about jinn. No, actually, you know what? He gets too deep into it. So this is what I wanted to. So وخلق الجن من مارج من نار فيه 5 أقوال أحدهما أنه لهب النار الثاني خلط النار أنه اللهب الأخضر والأصفر والأحمر الذي يعلو النار إذا أوقدت ويكون بينها وبين الدخان الرابع أنها النار المرسلة التي لا تمتنع قاله المبرد الخامس أنها النار المضطربة التي تذهب وتجيء وسمي مارجا لاضطرابه وسرعة حركته وفي الجان مخلوق منه الصالح ومنه الكافر منه الصالح ومنه الفاسد ومنه المسلم ومنه الكافر وقيل إنه إبليس وهو قول مأثور وليس بالمعتمد. So in that reference to good jinn, bad jinn, Muslim jinn, non-Muslim jinn is this is Mawardi who died in 450 Hijrah. So 11th century. So I mean and that's just a typical text. My point is that the de-emphasis among modern Muslims for anything, any knowledge about jinn is because of the desire for Muslims to catch up with modernity, to focus on scientific knowledge, to not embrace superstitious ideas, which is fine. I mean, in the West, I'm not worried about people dropping out of school and going to the witch doctor. In the West, the scale has gone the other way, perhaps, of too much reliance on science. So I'm not worried about telling you about what classical or traditional Islamic theology says about jinn. I have to admit that when we would, especially on, especially in Egypt, not so much in Kuwait, but especially in Egypt, when we would attend halaqat and they would talk about jinn, they would tell us, don't go around telling people what you've learned here, because of the worry that هتقول Ahmad and Ahmad, Ahmad is symbolic for just the average uneducated woman in Egypt. She will no longer go to a medical doctor and go to a soothsayer, and the soothsayer will exploit the hell out of her, as happened in our traditional societies throughout. The other thing that contributed to this is that the strict prohibition, especially the Wahhabis rekindled in the idea of death punishment for sihr, for the practice of magic, and actually implemented it in Saudi law. And unfortunately, I worked on a case of a Syrian guy who was put to death because but it was quite sad because his mother wrote a little hijab for him, and he was traveling. He was going to go to Saudi Arabia to work, and she put it in his pocket, and then his employer found it in his desk, and they accused him of sihr because of the hijab that his mother had written for him and put in his pocket. So we were working, I was Human Rights Watch at the time, trying to prevent his execution, and then they executed him without, we woke up one day and they told us it was done. Khalas. Just an example of how twisted things could be. Now that talk about the hostility to any semblance of sihr also emphasized the reluctance of modern day shuyukh, especially in Azhar, to talk to al-amma about anything that has to do with jinn. Huh?
Magic.
Sihr is magic. The practice of magic. Now, in this society, it behooves us to warn people, because I do know some Muslim kids who went and bought a Ouija board. And I would tell Muslim kids to Ouija. You don't know what a Ouija board is?
Sorry, I don't.
First time I hear
Oh, where am I?
Oh,
They sell it, they literally sell it at Target.
What is this?
Oh my God.
Ouija board?
A Ouija board, like if you see in movies, it's like
It's like a
a
small
board that
surfboard?
has, no, it's a board that has like letters on it.
It looks like
and
a
then-
board game with
You
like
see it in
things.
horror
Like
movies.
Jumanji.
There's like a
Yeah.
spirit.
Like that.
Are you in the room? And this
Triangle, like
Sorry for
move.
my
Your
ignorance.
hands on it with.
It's very violent.
like arwah.
Target.
yeah, I mean, the problem is that I don't know. It opens doors. I mean,
And
and you
Ouija,
don't
that's
know
Ouija.
what comes through.
Ouija or witchy?
I don't think
Ouija.
you can, even if you, honestly, to be
You
honest
can
with
make
you, if I
one,
took
right?
this bottle, huh?
Yeah, you can make a Ouija board.
Yeah. If I put
Anything.
this bottle on a table and I sit there and I call upon spirits,
Can move.
communicate with me, I've opened the door. I mean, you should, you do, and in this society, it is worth warning people, because among the best viewed shows are paranormal shows. They're very popular, but they're also very dangerous.
One person asked, "What are ghosts then?" And another person asked, "I thought these are relevant to what you're talking about. What is the difference between shaitan and jinn?"
Shaitan is a jinn, but there's not all jinn. Shaitan is a particular type of jinn. We understand that jinn, from what the tradition tells us, that jinns have been created into tribes. And the Quran tells us that some jinn are among them that dive underwater, among them that travel in the heavens. In Surah Rahman, there's even a reference, in Surah Al-Najm, there's a reference to jinn that would be able to travel close enough to the arsh, that to the throne, the divine throne, that, and they would try and yastariqu sama, to listen to what happens at the divine throne. That's in the Quran. I mean, read it,
Yeah.
Surah Al-Najm. And that Allah banned that, prohibited that. That's what, again, the Quran tells us. So the jinn are tribes and nations of different abilities and capacities. Shaitan, according to traditions, now I can't say that I've researched the authenticity of these traditions, so I'll just say them without saying whether I believe they're authentic or not. That he was from a particularly powerful tribe, and he disobeyed God on the grounds of arrogance, meaning God said, prostrate in respect. He said that Shaitan responded to God, who was jinn, not an angel. The Bible says that Satan was an angel, fallen angel. The Quran says Satan was a jinn, not an angel.
Jinn are made from fire.
And jinn are made from fire. Angels are reportedly made from light. And angels don't have volition. In Islam, angels don't have the ability to disobey. They don't have they were never given the blessing of autonomy and free will. Jinn were and humans were. And because they were, that's why Satan could disobey. Because if Allah would have willed as an angel, then he wouldn't have had the choice to say no to God. And that's why this is theologically important, because if angels were created without free volition, how could you have fallen angels? And it wouldn't be unfair to angels to be fallen if they don't have the choice. In a time in medieval age when predestination was such a hot issue, there were a lot of theologians that said, well, just, in the same way some people are predestined to hell, some people are predestined to heaven. There are fallen angels and unfallen angels, which, interestingly, Muslim theologians who resisted that type of predestination used to engage in long refutations of, because of course they were refuting Jews and Christians who intermingled with them and lived with them and so on. But so Satan then, as the Quran tells us, vows not just to disobey. It tells God, I will not prostrate in out of respect for that wimpy creation of yours, humans, because I have been created from a superior substance. Right? خلقته من طين وخلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين. And God says, responds, you will not be allowed, ليس لك أن تتكبر فيها, that you will not be allowed to be arrogant. Fascinatingly, some commentators on the Quran, and this is medieval commentators, and that's why it's so fascinating, pointed to this and said, this is the basis upon which the Prophet ﷺ said, لا فضل لعربي على عجمي إلا بالتقوى, that an Arab is not better than a non-Arab except through piety. In other words, that God condemned racism on part of Satan, putting the value of things according to the substance of what they're created from or what they look like. And so when the Prophet ﷺ came and said, there is no difference between an Arab and a non-Arab, in other words, there's no difference between a Persian and Arab, a white or a black person and a white person, that, now again, I emphasize, this is in the freaking 9th century. Right, long before we started talking about race as a concept, right? So you have that embedded in the Quranic message, a condemnation of racism, which is affirmed by the Prophet ﷺ. It's mind-boggling. I mean, if Muslims just learn their tradition, we could be somewhere. You know, it's. And that's why when I find a Muslim who's racist, I like nearly have a heart attack, because they're going against the entire thrust of the Quranic message. I mean, the reason Satan was damned is because he was a racist. Told God, I'm better. I'm from a better substance. So God said, that's so racist of you, you're so arrogant, you don't have any humility, get out of my face. So Satan, being stubborn, not just arrogant, but also racist, but also defiant, which is the moral fault that is the true fall of people who are unable to repent. Satan tells God, so I will stalk your sirat, that straight path that you want human beings to walk on, that scale of justice you want them to pursue. Well, I will make it my business to make them go astray. And I will do so, and then tells God, and most of them will follow me. Most human beings. So God responds, you have no sultan, you have no power over those who refuse to follow you and follow me. From that, our shuyukh said that if you believe in God and you are pious, no demons have any power over you. So that's when the reformers wanted to convince Muslims to stop being superstitious and to go after scientific pursuits, what they anchored themselves on is, well, if you are a good Muslim, nothing demonic can have power over you. Now, I absolutely believe that, and so I don't fear going into, but I also know that would be contrary to God's will. So I cannot be a good Muslim and sit there and play with a Ouija board. Now, we don't teach people that. I understand why they don't teach it in Egypt. Well, actually, I'm not sure if I understand anymore, because I don't think people have changed. I mean, kids now in Egypt and in Saudi Arabia do whatever they want, and if you're not straightforward with them. So the last time I was in Egypt, I found like people had already seen all these ghost shows on computers, and they were very defiant towards their parents when they told them, oh, that's kalam fari or khurafat and so on. And they say, oh my, if in America they know about the paranormal. Now I have to tell you, there's some incredibly impressive equipment that they've developed. I mean, they believe that they're gonna scientifically crack the world of the paranormal. I believe that before that happens, and I'll tell you why I believe that in Surah Rahman as we go on, God will close the book. Everything will be wrapped up. In other words, there are dimensions separating us. If we come to the point where scientifically we can actually penetrate that dimension, that will be contrary to the logic of creation and can't continue. But that's, I mean, am I freaking you guys out with this? Oh, what is ghost? Okay, I'll present what you can ask different shuyukh and get different answers. Some will tell you there are no ghosts, it's all in your head, and it's all psychology. I don't believe that. Why? Because material reality puts the lie to that. There's a building in Alexandria that's still abandoned in 50 years. No one no one, and I mean no one, has, with all azmat al-sukkan from us, all the people steal anything. No one dare stay in that building, and everyone that has tried have ran out. It is terrifying. I've tried to sneak in there, and I've actually jumped the wall. I could not go in.
They demolished it.
They demolished it?
And it's been built, and the condos are very expensive right now.
So, no
There.
ghosts anymore?
If they're lucky.
Trust me, I just came back in April, and I was shocked when I saw it. Because I used to pass by it when I used to go to school.
There was a villa in Kuwait that was also like that. It was eventually demolished, and the only thing they could build in that spot was a mosque.
So are ghosts
I saw
a
it.
genre
Oh,
something
no, I'm
else?
saying, yeah, so I should finish my thought. So ghosts. Now, I believe that that ghosts are invariably jinn, even those who mimic human beings, including mimic the voice of human beings. Some people will capture the voice of loved ones on electronic equipment.
Mimic doorbell.
I believe the ones that deal with human beings are invariably don't have good reasons. Now, having said that, I've had enough, and I'll tell you that a good number of shuyukh believe that it is possible, with God's permission, and including Sheikh Qazwini, who I have tremendous respect for, if he hears this recording, salam alaikum, who I had a discussion with about this, and he believes that loved ones could be given permission by God to come back and look after their loved ones, or greet their loved ones, or convey a message to their loved ones. He cites a lot of very good evidence for that, theological evidence. I have not migrated to that position. I'm still skeptical. But I can't deny that the theological evidence makes it an entirely defensible position. That it is possible for Allah to give permission to loved ones to, because I miss my mother very much, I wish that Allah would give her permission to come visit me, but I don't expect it and would not pray for it because I don't. My belief is that it's jinn playing a trick. Allahu alam, Allahu alam. I might be wrong. Now, would I say I might be wrong about those who deny the existence of the paranormal? No. I am comfortable at this point in my life to say anyone that denies the existence of the paranormal at this point, I feel sorry for them because their world is so narrow within objective reality. And because of what I've seen and what I do see with my own senses, and it's undeniable. It surrounds you everywhere. Yes, please.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to harp on this. So I'm not questioning the existence of another realm, a light which we don't have perceptual access to. But then there are a few problematic things from this. One being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has somehow had one of his created beings defy him. And the grand plan for creation and existence and things like that somehow was co-managed by the shaitan,
What do you do with the revelation itself, in which Allah told us that Allah tells us repeatedly, talks about shayateen al-ins wa jinn, right? That shaitan, by the way, the demons, are not just jinn, they're also humans. And humans can become demons.
I know many.
Yeah. Absolutely evil. And so the
I can
demonic.
name them.
Huh?
I can name them.
Yeah. And a shaitan, the terminology is quite remarkable because it is a disobedient being that exists out of the order of things. It comes from shatat. يَشُطُّ عَنَ الْأَمْرِ. So it is out of the order of things. Now, what is the order of things? The order of the scale, the namus that Allah created, the logic of creation. So when Allah refers to shayateen al-ins wa jinn, and in fact, recognizes that we seek refuge from Allah, that we ask Allah to help us and aid us against shayateen al-ins wa jinn. On the one hand, I mean, if Allah could have, if Allah willed, Allah could have instantaneously ended the story of Satan at the moment of disobedience, right? But in the same sense, Allah could have also snuffed out any human being that becomes disobedient. I mean, as Allah tells us, if Allah willed, everyone on the face of the earth would have believed. So, but when the moment that Allah gave volition and the power of choice, then you have the power to defy Allah. Now, is it defiant in the sense that we conquer God? Obviously not, because we defy, but our defiance continues because of the blessing of choice. And what I find fascinating, I mean, you might the safest way to do this is just watch some documentaries or read some books about the paranormal, because it's ironic that the ones, as Muslims joined modernity and embrace scientific inquiry, and pretty much in Egypt till today, the way that the books by what's his name? No, I'm thinking of some of the people who have written about the world of jinn and so on. A lot of the classical texts, they're sold by only through connections, and in Maktabat al-Azhar you go there and you know a dealer who, and they're extremely expensive. Not because they're banned, but because books in bookstores don't carry them, and I've heard that Amn al-Dawla comes and harasses them if they carry them, and although they're not officially banned. Apparently Amn al-Dawla, part of their charge in Egypt is to combat black magic. Law. But I've heard that from booksellers who wanted to sell me texts that said this is £1,000, and I would say, why? Say, oh, you know, if Amn al-Dawla knows I'm carrying this book on my security forces, yeah. They would come and confiscate it, and I would be in trouble, etc., etc. So apparently it is a concern. But what is fascinating is that at the same time, the people who've written a lot about the occult, and written rather extensively, are people all Western, in the Western civilization, and it's and they developed it into a whole school of philosophy. What's her name, Madame Blavatsky? Yeah. The whole school of theosophy. If you read the philosophy of theosophy, it's a mixing of pagan, paranormal, with some very interesting psychological insights, some very interesting experimentation in the paranormal realm. If you read the works and schools of black magic, by the way, in our day and age, in the West, and especially in net societies, things are huge. I mean, enormous. I've been in homes in which people have practiced black magic, and what I've seen with my own two eyes and experienced, I cannot deny it. Now, I don't wish that experience on you, because when people have the experience, it shakes them to the core. And they look white, and they look traumatized, and they often go to... I heard from a friend that there are now psychologists that specialize in treating...
Satanic ritual abuse.
Yeah. So... Okay.
Just
On
so
that
you know,
happy
it's
On that happy note,
8 o'clock now. Just to let you know.
what time?
It's
Eight.
8.
Oh,
Oh my God.
okay. What area did we stop at?
I think we 13.
Okay, can just please remind me.
That's
I won't
a
forget.
good number.
There are layers of pearls of wisdom and insight that are still going to unfold, and I'll tell you, if you stick, you know, if لا تقل كذا كذا كذا, no point for regret, but I'm thinking, if I would have done the commentary on the Quran a while ago, like years ago, the more you learn about the Quran, the more you feel like you're holding a piece of gold, and the fact that we Muslims are not aware of the extent to which Allah gave us a gift is mind-boggling, because it truly, when Allah tells us that in God's revelation, in the Quran, is an answer to all the problems that will confound you. It is truly, literally true. It is in every sense true. Okay,
But
alhamdulillah.
hold on, just
Yeah.
to clarify, because you've done a lot of tafsir in the past.
Oh, okay.
So, so for people who are not aware, we're actually working, Sharif actually is also working on cleaning them up. And because they were recorded on audio cassette tape. So we digitized and now we're cleaning up and stuff. So, I think you did like, how many? Like
How many hours?
I don't know
mean,
how many hours. But
he's only on
there's
Al-Fatiha.
There's like 50. I've done a lot because I've done like building a partnership with God, the fog of self-deception, other lectures. On Fatiha alone, there's probably 15 to 20 sessions, and I've separated them by subject. I've separated like the question and answer, so and I've put it all in order on our SoundCloud. If you follow us on Facebook, I share it regularly on there, and you can stay up to date. Or you can also email me directly, and I'll be happy to, because those are a lot of the reason why I felt so passionately and not just reminding you over the last 6 years to do Rahman, but to do Tafsir al-Quran, because those have taught me that just reading an English translation is not sufficient. A lot of the Quran classes that I've been to in the past are not sufficient, even with Arabic speakers. And it's completely revolutionized the way that I engage even with Al-Fatiha. I mean, I've spent now months on Al-Fatiha, and I love the process of going and editing it all, because it's completely changed the way, and I was raised by you. So if it completely changes the way that I engage with Al-Fatiha, then I know that it's going to be that rewarding, if not more, to other people. So
But beyond Al-Fatiha, because these started back in the 90s.
Yeah.
We got married in 1995. He started in 1996, and I've been recording him since then. So those, and we made them available originally on scholarofthehouse.org, which was the old website, parts of it which you can still access, and you can then from there get a link and find the recording and download it. But I think he did at least 10 surahs.
I
So
think it
there's
went
a
up
lot.
to,
So we're gonna make that. I mean,
I
anyway,
think
the
it went up
new
to Al-Alaq, actually,
Yeah,
which is
so-
a lot more than 10.
more than 10. So
And then we also have on iTunes, the iTunes podcast. If you subscribe, I upload to there too. And the cornerstones of the Quran was a different approach to the Quran, but are also, so I mean, there's so much.
So we're working now on making those, cleaned up and available. This is part of, the importance of what we're doing here, and why, we ask for support and we ask for, help, because if we can hire people to do this, then that makes it more available to the world. So more
You actually
reason to donate.
I did give the series of tafsir, and then the halaqas that I gave, the cornerstones of the Quran, or the major themes of the Quran, in I don't know how many hours it was, but it's actually these were very important lessons. Any Muslim should listen to that, because it summarized the major themes of what the Quranic message is about, and did it in a systematic way. I think it was 6 hours or something like that, or maybe.
And
That's
more.
right.
I mean, we got together, I think, at least 6 times, and each time that we got together, it was like
It was
this
like
kind of a
this.
session. It was like 3, 4,
So
5
that's more
hours.
6 hours. So then maybe
Yeah, so-
Is it like in order, or you choose one of the
No, it's in
surahs?
order.
Those ones were not on specific surahs.
Not on
Those
specific.
were.
I summarized what the Quran is about, and I did it because I had some people at the time who wanted basically a summation that they want sort of a crash course on what they can teach other people about the Quran. But of course, I went into a lot of different issues, like the different schools of tafsir, the different methodologies of tafsir, and the whole layers of revelation within the Quran, and leave alone things like some parts of the Quran that invite you to reflect upon truly the metaphysical, such as Surah Al-Kursi and At-Kursi and not Surah At-Kursi and the whole revelation about God's light and God's nature and things like that and so on. But yeah, these I forget that all this.
Yeah, there's so much, and it builds on each other. Because I mean, you spent, I think, I dedicated one whole chapter just to what you say on Ar-Rahman, and explaining the different schools of thought with Ar-Rahman, just the word because of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's worthwhile if you're going to come back to these to listen through those, because it will build on
please listen
itself.
to as much as you can of them. It really does build upon, and then you reminded me, I actually did spend, I spent hours on just the Rahman and the Rahim.
Yeah, and on the difference between the
two.
different schools of thought.
So you can find a lot of this on searchforbeauty.org or on SoundCloud, which is also Search for Beauty, and iTunes, or usuli.org.